making things up on the spot is very important to D&D. But how do you get good at that? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today on today's show. We're talking about improv, probably a little comedy, and hopefully we're going to have some laughs. And I'm joined here by a very special guest, TJ. What's your last name?
Salmon.
TJ Salmon. And this is How to Be a Better DM. This is a show for dungeon masters who want to create the best game ever without spending extra time, extra money, an extra headache, and really just hone their craft. And I'm your host, Justin Lewis. We've been doing this for over 150 episodes now. And like I said, we're talking about improv today. And you can see, if you're looking on YouTube, we're in downtown Provo at Comedy Sports. And they have graciously opened the door for this hobo to come in and ask them about D&D. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, no problem. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so I wanted to dive right in and ask probably a super simple question, but what are the fundamentals of improv?
It's a whole lot of yes and, which I'm sure, is what everybody hears about improv. But it's about not turning down someone else's creativity. It's about leaning into it and just kind of moving on with it.
That is a super interesting answer. And for possibly the newbies out there, can you describe what yes and means and why that applies to D&D?
Yeah, it's a lot of, especially for improv and being on stage, you don't want to just like stop things dead where they are and be like, no, we're going to do my thing. It's a lot of just like, yeah, I love what you said, and I'm going to add on to that, and we're just going to take turns kind of building each other's story, creativity, what have you. And for D&D purposes, I think that's huge as far as like, in player engagement and just building stories.
So you said a super, super important thing, and you said the yes-anding is not deciding that what I have is more important or more cool than what you've got going on, right? And it's sort of this subordination of yourself in a way. So how do you, first of all, have the presence of mind to kind of tamp down any natural ego that might be there, but also just kind of have this curiosity of like, oh, that's cool. Let's dig into that.
It's, first off, that's hard. It's so hard to do that because, as like a creative individual, you're always going to feel like, oh, trust me, you just got to trust me. What I have is going to be so good kind of thing. But to just do your best to suppress that. And I think most people will find that when you collaborate on most things, it makes things better. And whether that's just a story or even an improv scene, that kind of stuff, it genuinely really just amplifies the good from both people kind of, performing.
I like that. You use the word collaboration, and obviously D&D is a collaborative storytelling experience. And as a dungeon master, in your experience, how have you coached your players to key on to that fact that it is a collaboration and that they can impact what you are going to do?
I think a lot of that does rely on the DM to kind of pull the, participation out of the players. And I think the more, or I should say, the less that you can kind of monologue and narrate, the more that you can be like, how's your character feeling right now?
Yeah.
Or what is your character, wanting to do in this exact moment kind of thing. The more you can kind of pull out of them and then you yourself just be responding rather than directing is, I think, huge.
You keep saying these such great answers that I just want to dig into. But first, let's get some background information, right? Obviously, Comedy Sports, for the listener, in downtown Provo is it's a comedy club, would you say it? Or just a venue?
I'd say so. It's a club.
A club. 100% dedicated to improv comedy, right?
100%.
So how did you start improv?
It was something that in middle school and high school drama classes that teachers would be like, I've got a fun game we could play. And they wouldn't tell you that it was improv, but it's 100% an improv game. And it's, pulling engagement out of, 13-year-olds that think they're too cool to do stuff in front of their friends kind of thing. And I really enjoyed that kind of stuff. And of course, it's very hard to find somebody who wasn't a fan of like Whose Line Is It Anyway.
Absolutely. If you remember that, I mean, there's a chance the audience is like, what is it?
Yeah, for sure. If you have time on YouTube, I'm sure there's compilations, but
so good.
Love that kind of stuff. And then as a youth, I came to one of these shows for like a group activity kind of thing and loved it. Thought it was amazing. Didn't know how it'd ever become a part of this kind of thing. Yeah. And then through a friend that was already doing this, invited me in and haven't been able to stop since.
Wow. So how did you get started into being a dungeon master?
Weirdly enough, the same friend, Eli, shout out, who kind of pulled me into this, we were like 12 years old, sitting at his house, and we're like, we want to play D&D because, you know, we've heard so much about like the cool aspects of it. We're huge Lord of the Rings fans, of course. Yeah. Wanting to play it so badly, but you know, not having the financial aspects or even just the internet know-how to pull rules and information. We would play what was called D&D Junior, is what we called it.
I love it.
And it was literally just role play and using little D6 dice that we found from like Yahtzee.
That's so great.
Just going off of that and not knowing, you know, pluses to hit or charisma scores or anything like that. It was just me and him and one or two other friends just being like, yeah, we're going to make up stories for fun. And that was just it.
Honestly, I'm super jealous. So I got into D&D, I want to say like 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago. Maybe it's more. But like, I'm super jealous of the people who found it earlier. And also of people like you where your experience was maybe a little bit more pure than I think other people, right? So on the show, I often say that to play any role-playing game, honestly, you just need people, a story, and then a group or a set of rules that everyone agrees that they'll abide by, right?
Right.
So you guys made up your own RPG, right? Which is awesome.
Yeah, no, and it stemmed from a lot of us, like, you know, how kids do jumping on a trampoline and making up characters and play fighting, you know, and then it was just like, how can we kind of amplify that a little bit, tell like an actual story instead of just, you know, making up fight scenes for fun kind of thing.
Dude, you just took me back.
Yeah, no, 100%. No, I mean, I'm sure locked away in my brain somewhere, I've got hundreds of characters I came up with where it's like, I've got this ability and I'm an elf and whatever. Like, yeah, it was just good fun that we could do.
Yeah.
So
mostly fair, right?
Right.
Mostly fair.
Yeah, mostly.
I love it. So fast forward to your first time actually on stage as an improvisationist. Is that the term?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. An improv artist, maybe?
Sure. Yeah.
How would you rate your nerves on that particular occasion?
Borderline paralyzing.
Oh.
Yeah, it's terrifying because I think the only way that you can get over that, unfortunately, is from brutally failing over and over and over again.
I'm guessing you're saying that from experience.
Super. Yeah. No, 100%. And it's sitting in front of a room of strangers and saying what you think is like the funniest thing on the planet and looking out into the crowd and just crickets. And you just go, okay, I'm not as funny as I thought. And realizing that it's not you saying something funny, it's you building something with somebody else and that being it funny. Like, if you want to be funny by yourself, you could be a stand-up comedian. Yeah. Like, there's 100% routes that you can go. 100%. But, like, in order to be an improviser, it's what people find the funniest is just honesty and leaning into stuff.
Wow.
So
that's really incredible, especially because I think for a lot of new players, honestly, new dungeon masters, right, they might be too afraid to start because they're going to DM for a group of people. They're maybe thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do. What if someone asks me, can I do this? And what am I supposed to say? But I think what you just said there, if you treat it as everyone has the responsibility of making the game interesting.
For sure.
Then obviously it's a lot less on your back.
Right. No. And I mean, you're always going to find players that like their favorite thing is to stump a DM or to break the game or that kind of stuff. And those guys are fun.
Yeah.
Not shaming. But yeah, and you'll eventually learn to deal with that. And I think even if it's at all possible, starting your first round of DMing with like a safe space, a group of people you know and love is huge for your own kind of like building up.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious, your first experience, you had to deal with obviously some failure. And as a DM, sorry, but you're also going to deal with experiences where you're like, dang, didn't do that right.
Right. No, for sure.
How much practice had you done up until that point, and what did that practice look like?
By the time I had unfortunately got stuck as a forever DM, I've been doing improv here for probably about 3 or 4 years, because up until that point I'd been a player. You know, like I was just like enjoying the vibes of the game and losing myself.
Not
in
a care in the world.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, to be just a player is the dream.
Oh yeah.
But as a DM, when you first get stumped, it's terrifying. And I think leaning into that and just being honest with the player, be like, that's a great thing you just did. I want to look up and see what happens, kind of thing. Or, you know, I have no idea, you know, let's look into it, kind of thing. And that kind of builds the engagement a little bit. Of course, you're going to have people where it's like, okay, you're rifling through a book now, you're taking me out of it.
Yeah.
But I think if you can just be like, you know what, time stops or whatever, and then you just quickly kind of rifle through your book and then, okay, now this happens, kind of thing. Just do whatever you can to kind of roll with it. And eventually those moments become so few and far between that, you know, it's not a big deal.
I love it. Are there, when you're on stage as an improv artist, I'm guessing you don't really have that opportunity to be like, let me just think about something for a sec, right?
For sure. No, you absolutely don't. Which is a different kind of, I think of it as fun now, but earlier on, a different kind of fear.
Yeah.
But you learn kind of tips and tricks to kind of deal with it. And a lot of it, I mean, is just humanizing yourself and just being like, you know, having a random heckler shout something at you and be like, hey man, come on, kind of thing. And everybody kind of laughs it off, or be like, you hurt my feelings, kind of thing. Are you happy with yourself? And people just find that, you know, fun. Like, you know, you're opening yourself up to a group of people, and a lot of people find that humanizing. Yeah.
That's a very interesting idea, because I think as a DM, you know, like there's nothing wrong with when you are stumped a little bit and your friends are just sitting there waiting, you know, you could be like, dang, well, you got me.
Right.
Well, let's figure out what to do now, since you didn't want to go down that path.
For sure.
You know?
No. And I feel like when you say that kind of stuff and you laugh it off, you get your players like kind of like, you know, chuckling in the moment, high-fiving each other, being like, look what we did. Oh my gosh, this is so cool, kind of thing.
I actually think for players, sometimes that's a win.
Oh, for sure.
Right, which is an interesting thing, like, because you don't necessarily, some people do, but you don't go to a comedy show hoping to be a heckler.
Right. No, for sure. And I will say that I think being a heckler versus a player is slightly different, where I would hope that players are in the mentality of like, they're playing honestly as well, and they honestly found a way to, in a way, break you, where it's like, oh my gosh, I have no idea. And they're just like, wow, I'm so immersed in this, and I found something that's so unique and so like that, you know, somebody's not prepared for. It's amazing, kind of thing. And I think that's awesome, just to see that look and that realization and excitement from players. So fun. Yeah,
they almost need to switch from being like, I'm trying to break the game, to like, my character is trying to get out of this situation.
Right. You know? No, for sure. It's different, like mentality of actively trying to break something versus like, I'm playing this honestly and so like forward that, you know, I want to do this thing. And it's so cool to be like, wow, I thought of this thing that even the DM didn't think of, kind of thing. Yeah. And then the DM just acknowledging and being like, that's awesome. That's so cool. I never would have thought of that, kind of thing. Yeah. And just, again, building each other up.
Oh, that's so important. In one of my recent Instagram reels, I talk about how you have to be a coach to your players and rewarding them after they do some cool stuff.
For sure.
That is like number one thing, because when you're rewarded, you obviously want to do it more.
Yeah.
You know? And actually kind of talking about DM player interactions, I'm curious if you kind of compare improv artist on stage and audience versus DM and player, what are the similarities between those relationships and what are the differences that you see?
I think you touched on it really well. I think rewarding that kind of like people engaging is so huge for an improv show, where like somebody will say something that's a really good suggestion, be like, hey man, thanks, kind of thing. Or, just building it up, like even commenting on how like unique of a suggestion that was.
Wow.
And building them up. Yeah. And even in callbacks in later parts of the show, and just being like, yeah, and don't forget that person's vacation spot's Idaho, kind of thing. And they'd be like, oh man, he remembers me, kind of thing. Yeah. And it's just fun for other people to feel acknowledged in that kind of a setting. And in like a theater-esque setting, it's hard to find that in other aspects. Yeah. And so for improv, that's super huge. And that's something that you really lean into as a DM, is acknowledging how good something is, or like rewarding players. Like I do my best to like give players inspiration or cool things when they really engage with role playing, because I think as fun as the combat is and all that kind of stuff, I think it is the most vital part of D&D, is really leaning into your role play. And I love being like, yep, that's an amazing thing. You have inspiration now, or you did this amazing thing and you seem to notice this little thing in the corner, this little shiny object or what have you. And just maybe not immediate, but even just a little bit later on, but like rewarding them for being that engaged is huge.
Oh yeah. Like you said, it's a role-playing game, not a combat mechanic game, right? Like if you want something like that, go play Skyrim or whatever.
Right. Well, there's tons of real-time strategy games that
absolutely.
You can play. And I think that aspect's really great, because I think those games tend to filter in people into D&D. And so it's great to have those kind of players, because they can also, through combat, find ways to role play as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, combat's there because it's fun, and you need some sort of mechanical challenge,
for sure,
for the most part. Now for dungeon masters who don't necessarily feel good at improving, right? What are some exercises that they could do to practice, either alone or with other people?
I think a great thing, if you wanted to really throw yourself into the deep end, take out a notebook, write how you want to start a session and how you want to end a session, and that's it. And that's all you take into a D&D session. That's what I do now.
Yeah.
But like, if you really want to throw yourself in the deep end and be like, hey, players, this is how you start out. And then find ways later in the session, or just as you're going along, to just kind of like, filter them. Very slight nudges to what your big day is going to be for that session, kind of thing. And just kind of lean into them with that. Yeah. If you're wanting to find stuff on your own, I mean, that exercise in your head is also really hard.
Yeah.
Just being like, okay, I wake up in a tavern, now what? And just sit down with a notebook and write out, like, I want to do this. What am I seeing? What am I smelling? Who am I talking to? What's my goal, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's a stress-free, it doesn't feel stress-free while you're doing it, but a stress-free environment of just like, it's just you and a pen and paper. Yeah. Like, you figure out what you want your story to be. And you'll find good stuff eventually. And I think a lot of it's like using a drain pipe for the first time in 20 years. It's a lot of mud is going to come out, and eventually you're going to have, free-flowing ideas and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I really like that, because like, I often say that you should, as a DM, you should spend a little bit of time, hopefully every day, just writing, right? Just practicing, even if it's like 100 words, that's still good, because you got to go through like 900 crappy words to get to those like 100 good words, maybe in your, like, it depends on your case. But you also said that through the session, you can give minor nudges. And I think that is such an interesting thing, because on one of our last podcast episodes, we talked about railroading, right? And whether or not it's a bad thing, or if players actually have agency. And I'm curious, with improvisation, how does that play into the whole mix?
I think that the improvising aspect of me it sees railroading as such a red flag for me personally. I mean, I'm sure other people can find ways to make it work, but if you can creatively find ways to tell people they're on the wrong path, they'll figure it out themselves. Like, you don't have to be like, well, there's a brick wall here, you've got nothing. Sorry, you went down the wrong alleyway. But there's footsteps this way, kind of thing. Like, you don't have to, make it so cut and dry. But like, if you want to create a character and environment where, they can have fun talking to people in a tavern, but, it's just small talk and it's not really leading anywhere, but it's a fun little area for them to hang out. They'll eventually be like, we're not really getting anything. Maybe we should go, explore this other area kind of thing. And so one of my favorite DMs described it as it's like water coming down a mountain into a kind of a pond. Yeah. It's going to go in 1,000 different routes, but it'll eventually get there. Yeah. And so you just have to kind of, find that path for them.
That is very fascinating because I never really thought about it in terms of railroading your players. So I never thought about it in terms of like every single experience versus just the big ones, right?
Right.
So like you mentioned, if they are just improvising some sort of social encounter with the barkeep who you accidentally described him a little bit too interesting.
Oh my gosh.
And you're like, great, now we got to think of his name.
We need him in our group.
Exactly. But like, I love the analogy. And to me, it almost kind of points to the fact of if you're planning a campaign or kind of story arc, then you create these gravity wells almost of like problems, right?
For sure.
This is a problem that, Godzilla is destroying New York.
Right.
You guys can go have, a hamburger, but
right.
He's there.
For sure. And I think my DM style is so hinged upon like, there's a big thing happening right here, but like, a fire in a building in New York is happening, but also in Ohio, there's a monster on the loose. And also in Pennsylvania, there's this thing going on. Like, you can deal with this big day, but there's going to be other big stuff going around. Yeah. You don't have to follow what I wrote out. Like, it's just going to be like, hey, you hear some guys in a tavern talking about, an assassination attempt they want to do. Yeah. And do you want to follow that? And they're like, clip clop, the centaur's outside and we want to go for a ride. And it's like, sure, man, you're going to do that. And you follow that, and eventually you'll find ways to throw out little, story ropes of just like, yeah, as you're walking past, you see some guys whispering outside of a store, or over here you actually notice that you hear whispering down a well, kind of thing, and you'll find ways to throw things out to build out the session and the world as a whole. But absolutely let them have their shenanigans of just like this person's my new favorite person, and we're going to bring them along, and it's like. Yeah, why not?
I'm a bit of a control freak. I think I have some railroading tendencies, not because I'm like, oh, they need to do this, more because I think I'm afraid of not knowing, like what to do next. Mm-hmm. So like, how do you, for me, and hopefully Dungeon Masters out there who also share this problem, but like, how do you relax and just kind of let go and kind of be along for the ride a little bit, Well,
first off, to be a DM apologist, I think every Dungeon Master is a control freak.
Oh, yeah.
To an extent.
You're not the DM if you...
Exactly. If you don't have a god complex, you have no interest in DMing.
100%.
And so it's a spectrum, 100%, and you just got to do your best to tamp it a little bit. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I think the hardest aspect of it, I mean, it can happen with prep, of just like... hey, I've written down these 4 ideas that I think would be really fun in the session. Yeah. And we're going to start you guys out here, and whatever thing you end up doing, then great. And finding those little story ropes, it's something that can kind of happen just while you're following, that random string of just like, they want to go pick apples in the forest. Yeah. That's just what they want to do this session, And while you're hardcore leaning into that roleplay, which is going to happen because they're excited about it because it's what they want to do. Yeah. And while you're doing that, while you're sitting back, just be like enjoying the moment, but also thinking like, what would be a fun thing to throw in here? They go to grab an apple and it's a mimic, just fun little stuff like that. And
or there's a mind flayer worm inside.
100%.
Boom.
And,
terrifying.
Let's say that there's a goblin in the tree that they go to pick an apple from, and they decide to interrogate it, and you can use that as an avenue. Yeah. Like there's literally billions of things you could throw in just while you're sitting back, letting them have their shenanigans.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, no, it's so fun to just see a group be like, yeah, they decided to go do karaoke for 30 minutes, and that's what it was. And then while they were doing karaoke, somebody slipped something into one of their drinks, and now they have to deal with that kind of thing.
That's interesting. So every time I'm like, I'm going to ask this question next, you're like, oh, but this one thing. So all of the examples you've given are when they're doing something and problems or conflicts come to find them. Is that kind of your go-to, or like, are there other ways that you would introduce, or you know what I mean?
I think that's definitely the route that I like to go for more tentative players.
Yeah.
Players that don't, like, I mean, you're going to find your murder hobo group that you never have to come up with something because, you know, they are going to decide to kill this random person
just
and
cause.
You can build off of that.
Yeah.
But the more tentative groups where it's just people that are, you know, maybe slightly newer to D&D or just more shy individuals that you have to find things to, you know, engage them and maybe heighten the stakes just a little bit. It doesn't have to be like a huge world-ending event, but it could just be, you know, you're part of a heist now, and it's because you decided to go to the bathroom at this time.
Wrong place, wrong time.
That's just what it is. So, you know, now you get to deal with it kind of thing.
Hey there, listener. We need your help. We need you to do us a favor. So we are offering, starting today, professional Dungeon Master services for any private or corporate party looking for a Dungeon Master willing to take them on a fun and interesting adventure. And right now, like I said, for the first 5 people to sign up, it's free. All we ask for is honest feedback and critiques, as well as possibly a review. So if you want to help us out and do this favor for us, go to sessionzerostudios.com/dungeon-master-4-hire and sign up today.
Or you get to find a way to get out of the heist. And so, you know, I think those are the 2 routes I like to go where, you know, you've got the group that's going to instigate everything.
Yeah.
And you can use thousands of their, you know, Geneva Convention-esque kind of actions to build off of.
Yeah.
Or you have the shy group, the fun-loving group, the laid-back group, and you can find things to just kind of, you know, raise the ceiling as far as, like, you know, excitement goes.
Yeah. I like that a lot. As far as session prep, you mentioned that your kind of go-to is generally just, here's where we start, here's where we end, maybe 1 or 2 points in the middle. But what's your method, or I guess rather, how do you balance improv versus planning in terms of planning entire campaigns or story arcs?
I think the definitive moment for me is one of my first groups, my favorite group. I shouldn't say favorite. One of my favorite groups. We were doing the Curse of Strahd campaign. Classic, a favorite for good reason.
Yeah.
And I had planned out this whole session like to the minute. Like I had maps drawn out, all this kind of stuff. They were going to go to this area and do a specific thing. I had read that section of the module specifically. I had it all memorized and ready. And we started out the session and they were like, we want to go here. And it's like, it's the other side of the map.
Yep.
Okay. I can't find a way to railroad you because it's a big open space and I'm not going to just poof up a couple of monsters to kind of shoot you that way. So we're going to go that way. And that session turned into one of my favorite sessions I've ever done, where it became this high stakes, fun thing based off decisions they were making in the exact moment. And it was just a fun little thing. And that has, for better or worse, shaped me into the kind of person where I do have a notebook now where it's just like, I've written down 10 things that I think could be good little tiny story arcs. And then I also have a page of just like, this is the long term of what I'm wanting to happen in the campaign. And I just alternate between the 2.
Wow.
And it's just like okay, you're doing this. I can tie that back in to the main thing. And then, okay, you want to do this? All right, I'm going to tie it back into this thing. And just ever so gradually kind of just, you know, moving the percentage point of like, you're 40% of the way through now of the big thing that I've planned.
That's interesting. So it's almost like a hot sheet almost of like the major thing and then the minor things and just how they tie back together.
Yeah, just doing my best to kind of like meld those together, not making it feel like, for the players at least, that it's like you're on this main story arc kind of thing the whole time. It's like, well, I mean, in any good book, there's going to be, you know, a 2-chapter arc where they went shopping or something. Like that's just what it was.
And it's not filler content. It's important to the story because they have to buy the pink whatever it was in Harry Potter, right?
100%. You know, and it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, we went on this random, you know, mini quest for you guys that ended up being basically an escape room where you found an immovable rod, and that's now in your inventory, and you're going to find a way for that to, you know, shatter my mind in the main arc of our last session. And it's going to be fun because I'm not even going to remember that you have that. Yeah. And you're going to toss it into this great thing, and it's going to create this wonderful story moment kind of thing.
That is so interesting to me. So, like, have you ever planned improv? Like, if they ever do this, then this thing is going to happen.
I think that's like a fun improvising like exercise to do just in general.
Yeah.
Of like, what would I do if they decided to do this?
Yeah.
What would I decide to do if they decided to try to, you know, shatter this? And then it's so fun to watch the players' minds when they're just like, actually, we're just going to leave. And you go, great.
Sweet.
Awesome. Okay, what do you guys want to do? Kind of thing. And they're like, okay, you were supposed to like...
You weren't supposed to act
like what do you mean? Or like, you know, there's 3 doors and they're like, we're going to explode all of them. And it's like, great.
Yep.
Okay, now this thing's going to happen. And it's just like fun to watch them react to a seamless turn of events because you've planned that out mentally in your head of like a what if.
Yeah. Do you have to have some sort of like poker face a little bit to mask like, I actually don't know what I'm doing, but like I do, you know?
I think it's fun to kind of go either way with that.
Gotcha.
Because, I mean, like we were talking about earlier, players love seeing that reaction on TM's face. It's just like, okay, cool, yeah,
that's
you broke it,
yep,
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or like, or seeing their face when you're just completely unfazed, and they're just like, wait,
he's planning something.
What does that mean? The random old guy that you have in the bar that we've been talking to forever. What do you mean he's a level 19 fighter? Like, why? I was just going to fight with him.
Yeah, you can still do that.
And it's like, you're going to, and he's going to bare hand slap you unconscious. And that's just what it is.
I love it.
But yeah, it's so fun. Just either way, I think there's huge pros and almost no cons to either way.
Yeah. I like that take. I think sometimes maybe as a podcast host, maybe I'm a little bit too like cut and dry, but I think it's good to think like, yeah, you can use any method really to your advantage. Sort of switching tacks a little bit. What about world building? So like, how do you world build with improvisation in mind?
Well, I think a lot of that stuff gets done like before your campaign starts.
Yeah.
A lot of that's going to be like, what kind of adventure, what kind of setting am I bringing to the group?
Gotcha. Kind
of thing. And I think it's so important to have that kind of rough outline, that shell of the game, which is always fun to break later. But to have that shell of just like, you know, this is what I want the world to be. This is what I want the campaign to be. Anything inside this giant sphere of this campaign is fair game.
Yeah.
And having that mentality of just like, you know, hopefully they keep it within these bounds. That would be great. I would love that because then I'm prepared for it. But if not, then it's whatever, you know. I think it'll be great to have that fun moment of like, you guys get on a boat and leave the Sword Coast. Great.
You go somewhere else?
Where are we going, man?
Yeah.
Like, where you want to, how long do you want to sail for? Which direction? What are we doing?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Are you going to find a random island of cannibals kind of thing? Like, what are we doing? I think that aspect of it, it's stressful, but so fun to just see players' minds work like that.
It seems like it requires a lot of trust in yourself, right?
For sure. I think it's trust in the fact that it's trust that you want them to have a good time. I think you're kind of a shepherd of the story and just almost like an usher for a movie ticket kind of thing. Like you're there to let them in and have them enjoy this story. You're really not going to be, this isn't for you. I think is the best mentality to have as DM.
Yeah.
So as long as you're leaning into that and just like, I'm here to make sure you have fun, which is a lot of what we do improvising.
Yeah.
Is like, this shows, it's doing a lot for my mental health to have you laugh for me.
But
don't get me wrong.
I mean,
but like it's tailored to them.
Yeah.
And that's what every session should be.
Huh. I really, really, really like that. And I think that's something that maybe a lot of DMs forget, especially those who might have world builder's disease, right? Who just like, oh, I have this really cool campaign idea, yeah, your campaign's really cool, but it's for other people.
Right. And your campaign's awesome, but like if you're forcing them to go into a cave for it to even start, like they're not going to have a good time.
No.
Like it's not what they're wanting to do. If you can find a way to mirror that with what your players are wanting to do, that's the best way you can go about it.
100%.
So,
what would you say are the biggest mistakes that improv aficionados make, whether they're dungeon masters or actual improv artists?
Just on the stage or while they're doing DM?
Both. Either. Yeah.
On the stage, I think the biggest problem that any improviser can have is just selfishness. I think that the minute that you're building a scene and you're doing this wonderful thing and you find something that you think is going to be funny, but also is going to do nothing for the scene itself. But it's going to make them laugh, and you say that, and they laugh, and that's great. But now there's nowhere to go. You're stuck. You used this funny moment to kill the scene, and it's great to have that laugh. But now they're going to sit there and look at you and go, "Okay, well, what's next?" I laughed. Now what? Kind of thing. And that's so hard to get rid of. That mentality of just like me first. And that can leak into just DMing in general. Yeah. And I think that's what turns off a lot of players from playing D&D in general. It's like, well, I mean, like, it's one of those 2006 PlayStation 2 games where it's like, it says open world, but like, I can only go down this alleyway. Yeah. Like, what do you mean? Yeah. I can't really do anything. I would love to keep, explore this alley or talk to that person, but that NPC has nothing to say, and I can't climb this and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So like, you've built a world, but you built an alleyway is essentially what you've done.
That's interesting.
And so I think that's the hardest thing, is letting go of that control that us DMs love to have.
Yeah. It's like, I honestly did not think we would talk so much about altruism, right? The idea of like viewing what you're doing from the point of view of someone else and thinking, does this bring them general joy or pleasure, right?
For sure.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. No, improvising in DM should be a selfless thing, 100%. And we're
90%.
Yeah,
I mean, you get some cool stuff too.
100%. Like you get those big villain monologues that are so fun. 100%.
Yes.
But yeah, it should be this thing that's just like, how can I help you have a good time? Yeah. Like let me help you kind of thing. And just dragging that engagement out of players it's a fun little puzzle in of itself. And once you figure it out, it's amazing.
Yeah. I want to kind of transition tracks a little bit. Talk more about comedy, right? Because as a dungeon master, you'll probably get some laughs whether you want them or not. But hopefully you can learn how to elicit laughs and the kind that you want in the way that you want, right? So how do you be funny?
We talked a little bit about it earlier. I think it is honesty. I think some of my favorite moments playing video games growing up as a kid is a character saying something so earnestly, but it's so funny in that moment. And it's because they 100% believe it and want that kind of thing. Like a shop owner being so obsessed with their merchandise to a Mr. Krabs level of money loving kind of thing. Exactly. And then the players, being like, we should steal something kind of thing. And having the manager freak out, and it's this big moment, and the players are going to laugh and love that. And it's because you're so invested in who that, you know, random NPC or whatever person you've invested in 100%. And you're not doing it as a gimmick or a joke, because audience members, players see through that 100%.
Yes.
It's unfortunately just so see-through when you're just like, and, you know, I'm this, you know, random gnome guy.
I'm funny.
Right. And your player's like, cool. But, you know, the half-elf shop owner that's like super obsessed with the dark arts, but you gave him the name Kevin. They're going to love Kevin.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin's their favorite person.
Kevin. Tragic life. But
yeah.
Kevin. Yeah.
But yeah, and so if you just lean into just being honest with things and being 100% involved with things, that itself lends to comedy way more than, like, you know, gimmicks or, you know, I said this funny thing, you know, and it's like, oh, players, you know, funny joke kind of thing. And they're like, okay, cool.
Moving on.
Yeah. Like, I mean, and there's other ways that you can throw things in. Like, for instance, with one of my groups, I was like, oh yeah, you stumbled upon this betting ring that's, you know, among these 4 different kings, and they love to bet on this big thing, and it's called DraftKings. And it's like, funny, because it's a real world thing kind of thing. You could always lean into random stuff like that.
Like, play on words, I think, are slightly different.
For sure.
Depending on your party.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so, like, there's different things that you can do. You can have nods to the real world kind of thing. That's always fun. But yeah, I think it's the honesty aspect more than anything is so huge with DMing and improvising.
So it sounds like first step is don't try to be funny. Like, I'm going to be funny.
It's so hard.
Oh my gosh. Right.
It's so hard.
Especially if, like, that's like your emotional crutch.
Right.
I'm not pointing at anyone specifically.
As someone who, for the majority of his life, has sought any kind of emotional validation through making people laugh.
Agreed.
It's so hard to avoid that.
Yeah.
It's so hard to just be like, I'm just going to be this person. Mm-hmm. I'm Farmer McGraw, and that's what he is, kind of thing. But then eventually you'll get that payoff. Mm-hmm. And there's other kinds of payoffs that you get as a DM that, you know, aren't comedy, that I feel like emotionally you get way more.
Oh, yeah.
Like that feeling of all the players packing up that stuff and being like, that was amazing.
Yeah. Or and like when they say, like, oh, we have to wait another week.
Right. So it's like, or like they're halfway through the session and they're like, okay, when are we doing the next one of these? This is awesome, kind of thing. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is way better than a big laugh.
Yeah, you won D&D. In that moment when they're like, can we play again? You win. Check.
No, when a one-shot turns into, we want to do a campaign of this. We want to build these characters out. This is awesome, kind of thing. Yeah. And so it's, there's, as somebody who seeks comedy and needs laughs, there's, whether you believe it or not, bigger payoffs than a big laugh.
100%.
So you have 100%. To just fight that urge just a little bit.
Yeah. You said something else that I wanted to key off of. Yes, being honest. And I think that is just like so good. Like such a good thing to say, because I've been wondering a lot lately about, well, not wondering, but I had this thought that, like, anime shows are just like so much better writing than a lot of other shows nowadays, unfortunately, and TV shows. I'm looking at you, Disney. Sorry.
Well,
yeah, I have. They'll probably cancel me. It's not that hard to cancel, anyways. But I thought it was because they do a lot of character development. Like, their characters are generally better, and I think it's because of what you said. It's their characters are honest, right?
Right.
And they're honest in their own, like, Japanese way,
right?
Like, which is kind of cultural differences, but you have a character who's like, this is the most important thing to me, and I will do anything for this.
Right. And it's that feeling of your innermost thoughts. You say all of them out loud.
Exactly.
That's just what it is. Yep. And that's a great thing to have in a player, and even a better thing to have as like a DM with NPCs and that kind of stuff. Like, for instance, Farmer McGraw, he would give anything to have his talking cow back. You have no idea the problems. And you bring the talking cow back, and it's a djinn, and that's just what it is. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is just building. Like, it's so many fun things.
Yeah.
But like, it's that emotional availability. Anime. It's funny you say that, because I've tried getting my wife into anime, and she has a hard time with it because it's so emotionally invested. It's too heavy.
Yeah.
She doesn't enjoy that.
Yeah.
Like, she needs that little kind of gap of just like wondering what a character's thinking and that kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong, there's huge pros to that. There's wonderful TV shows that do that.
Yeah.
But that immediate emotional investment of just like, these are my deepest, darkest, fears. These are my biggest desires. This is emotionally, I'm just openly vulnerable.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to, turn off that connection between those things.
But it's so good.
True.
It's so good.
For sure.
And I do think that if you can reach that sort of level of vulnerability, right? And like be the character and be honest with yourself about what the character wants.
Oh yeah.
Then that like leads to better improv, better role play, better comedy, because you're like, yeah, my character would absolutely kick that child because they're being super annoying.
I mean, yeah. Or my character would 100% try to fight you for stealing his stuff.
Yeah.
He's not going to just be like, whoa, guys, kind of thing.
Yeah, no.
Like, no, this is his livelihood. He's going to fight you for it, kind of thing. Or, if you tried romancing this character for fun, for kicks and giggles.
For fun.
Yeah.
Right.
No judgment. But now this character has a huge emotional investment in you. Maybe this character's a stalker. Maybe you're going to go to camp later and you're going to hear somebody just whisper through the tent being like, I miss you, kind of thing. Like, you've just added something to, or maybe now you randomly see this character from town to town and it's impossible for you to go undercover because they're obsessed with you. It's just like, there's so many things that you can add now because you've made that random NPC a person.
Yeah.
And they're living in this world now. They have choices.
I think that is the best thing. Honestly, I think new mechanic, if your party member seduces more than like 5 NPCs, every seduction after that has like a 50% chance of being a stalker.
Oh, yeah.
Just like,
oh, no, 100%.
This is the natural consequence. Or maybe children, or, there has to be consequences.
Right. No, 100%.
Unless you're...
Your random NPC has a one-night stand with somebody, and then, down the road, you're a dad now, or a mom, or whatever. Yeah. Like, this has consequences kind of thing,
Yep.
It's creating that open world of, like, real things. It's amazing. Like, it's so fun.
I freaking love that. That's, like, the best thing.
You obviously have good taste. I mean, you listen to How to Be a Better DM, after all. We thank you so much for your support. And if you've ever gotten anything useful from How to Be a Better DM, take a minute and rate us and review us on your podcast listening app of choice. It goes a very long way to helping our show help many more dungeon masters out there who are just like you. If you love our content, help others become better dungeon masters too.
Okay, let's see. I think we covered all the questions I was going to cover.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you desperately want to talk about?
Oh, desperately.
Or not even desperately, just like, let's talk.
I think D&D is such a fun thing for people to do when I just have a bone to pick with main character syndrome. I think is the biggest thing. I think the minute you stop trying to break the world, trying to pull the focus, you'll find that you're more emotionally invested with things than ever because you're experiencing things as you would life. Not everything happens to you. Sometimes something happens to one of your other players in your party, and you're emotionally invested in that. You can be emotionally invested and have a big impact on things that aren't for you. And it's like watching a TV show, watching an anime. Something happens and you want to cry now because you're emotionally invested in that other person. And you can have that without pulling focus, without making things about you. I think that is so big, not just because it's a pet peeve of mine as a DM, But just like, I think that's for players in general, and even for DMs that can apply. Like, it's not all about your story. Like, you wrote a great campaign, you built a great world. Sure. It's not what they want to do.
No.
You pulled this group in. I think you could even suggest having a session 0, a session 1 without a campaign in mind.
Yeah.
Just start something of like, this group's meeting up their old college buddies and now they're hanging out, and you just do a bunch of fun random stuff in the first session, and then you take that, and then session 2 you come in with your campaign. It's like, this is something based off of the players. This isn't like a story I'm bringing to you, you're welcome kind of thing. I have this wonderful world. Just start something with a team, with a group, and then be like, gosh, what would be fun for this team? Or this random character talked about they don't have a good relationship with their parents. What if their parents were the king and queen? How fun would that be? Now you guys have to run from a whole kingdom. Like, this is what it is now. You're being hunted down because they want their kid back. Or it could be anything, you know? Center things around the players, not around you.
I gotta say, I freaking love that so much. You have flipped. So I'm currently working on like the next homebrew campaign that I'm going to do for my players after we finish my campaign, which hopefully I wrap up sometime soon.
Yeah,
who knows? But I love the idea of you guys make your characters, make them as cool as you want.
For sure.
I'll provide like the world. Let's pick spots that we just start. We just start in the same location, and I'll create some sort of plot hook that you can do in a session. But session 2, I'm going to slap you guys with some pretty hard campaign stuff because you guys started it with your backstories.
For sure.
Not my fault.
Yeah. I mean, whether players like to admit it or not, their favorite part is repercussions.
Yes.
They love seeing the effective things that they do.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a fun thing to do. And as a DM, making things up on the spot for that first session where you don't know what to do, you can make it easier on yourself. You could tell them, make whatever characters you want. Just make sure you guys already have a relationship to each other. I don't want to find a way for you guys all to become best friends.
Yeah.
You guys just make a way that you know each other. And then we'll go into this. I'll have something half-heartedly planned. And we'll do whatever we want. It'll be a fun little random one-off session of just doing whatever. And then session 2 onwards is repercussions. It's moving forward. It's taking these people that you built and told me about, and I'm going to make something off of that kind of thing.
Dang. I love that. And honestly, I think that is a good enough place to end for today. But before we do, 2 things. We are going to shout out your information. Well, not your information, but however you want people to reach out to you.
My social is 6. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to.
I thought you were talking social media. I was like, okay, go ahead.
No, social security. I trust all of you. I don't want you guys to follow me on social media. Maybe in real life. But Comedy Sports Utah. It's in Provo. Shows Friday and Saturday at 7:30, 9:30. Come if you like, or don't. I don't care. But it's a good time, and you'll have a good time. We also have workshops. That's where we get all of our players. If you guys want to sign up, it's on the website. I pointed, but it's on the wall, and you can't see that.
It's on that website on the wall.
It's comedysportsutah.com. I'm pretty sure is what it is.
I'll put it in the show notes.
There we go. Yeah, sign up. You can hang out with me sometime. Maybe you don't want to. You can avoid me sometime here, and do that then.
Yeah, awesome. And then a lot of my audience is actually outside of Utah. Some of it outside of the U.S. Do you guys have any sort of offering in terms of learning improv that's digital?
Yes, but I could also do you one better. We've got comedy sports places all over the U.S.
Oh, that's awesome.
All over. We're everywhere. We're in England a little bit. Look up your local comedy sports or just a local improv place in general. They're delightful people most of the time. And even if you don't want to do improv, as far as like public speaking, DM stuff, it's awesome and a good time.
100%.
So
I think a skill that everyone needs, for one, you just build a lot of confidence in yourself. 2, you talk and do things in front of people and you figure out that you're not going to die if you do it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And 3, you just learn how to make cool things. So definitely recommend it. Last thing we're going to do before we say so long to our listener, we need to give one final tip. One final tip. That was my terrible.
You nailed it. I felt like I was there. Yeah, that was great.
One final tip from each of us for the Dungeon Master, based on what we talked about today, or something extra that you want to add. Do you want to go first or last?
I'll go last. You go ahead.
Cool. So I think the thing that I would recommend to you, Dungeon Master, is in the first session, or maybe in session 0, sit down with your players. Have a real heart-to-heart. Get close to them. Put your hand on their knee if you have that relationship. But tell them that, one, they're not the main character, right? The party itself is the main character. And 2, tell each of them that whether the story is cool or not is not your responsibility. It's everyone's. And as long as they understand that and they accept it, the game is going to be good. But if they don't, then they might need to find a different table. Who knows? But that's what I recommend.
It's great. That's awesome. I would say do your best as a DM to think of yourself second. Think of your campaign almost even secondarily. Like it's more about what's happening in the moment. It's so easy as DMs to be like, oh man, how am I going to tie this in? Or how am I going to get them to this thing? And you can lose or even not see or notice little things that your players are doing or talking amongst each other, when you can find great things just by kind of staying in the moment. And it's so important to just be moment focused on everything that's happening right now.
That's just good advice for life. So hopefully you listen to this episode and want to be a better person. But thank you so much, TJ, for recording with me and making me laugh, and also changing the way I think about dungeon mastering a little bit. So I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. And for listener, we're going to be back next week with another amazing episode, as always. But until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.